Thank you all for coming. We truly appreciate it. My name is Giltaca. I'm the CEO and Executive Director of the Canadian Coalition for Firearm Rights, and I'd like to introduce Tracey Wilson, my Vice President of Public Relations from the CCFR. We're here in Ottawa this week to testify to the House Committee on Bill C-21, and I would like to take the opportunity to offer a little bit of perspective on the bill, some of our comments, and we're open to answering any question that you might have on any firearm-related issue, anything. Since 2015, when the Liberals were first elected, they've been hyper-focused on licensed gun owners, while violent crime has skyrocketed. Violent crime has risen more than 30% despite increased regulation on the firearms community. Think about that for a second. That translates into 120,000 more violent crimes per year now since when the Trudeau Liberals first took office back in 2015, and that's a lot of violence. We see a rise in gang violence in our largest urban cities, with a shocking trend of those gang members being younger and younger. Toronto Police Services estimate 86% of the city's crime guns that were traced were illicitly smuggled in from the United States. 86% of them. A perpetual cycle of violence has taken hold in our most vulnerable communities. Our youth are at risk. The Trudeau Liberal NDP government has made a conscious choice to use the chaos they've allowed to develop to attack law-abiding licensed gun owners. I want to stress that they are doing this by choice. Without providing any reasonable level of justification, they have deployed the nuclear option, gun bans. Bans on semi-auto rifles that we've had in Canada for over 100 years, 22 caliber rifles that just don't look right, and now all handguns. Anyone who opposes this will be personally attacked, which we saw last night in committee. Many non-gun-owning Canadians may not understand why banning guns is so bad. The reason the nuclear option of multi-billion-dollar bans sounds reasonable if it's predicated on the idea that firearm ownership is some frivolous, self-centered, unnecessary hobby that ought to just be swept away, and the owners of this property should be just swept away as well. I think it was Marco Mendicino that said, just move past it. He's talking about all of us. It's the idea that there's no real reason for anyone to own a gun, and I'll tell you that this does not align with reality at all. To help Canadians understand this, I'd like to answer the question that keeps coming up over and over again. Why does anyone need a handgun? In Canada, there are essentially three legitimate reasons, or there has been, to own a handgun: sport shooting or recreational shooting, inheritance, and collecting. And all three of these things are important aspects of Canadian life. They are good and sufficient reasons to own that kind of property. There are 650,000 Canadians who are licensed to own handguns. That's more people than play organized hockey in Canada, more people than play league hockey. Most gun-owning Canadians don't know this because the media doesn't cover these sports or tell these stories. Hundreds of thousands of people's lives are entwined in healthy Canadian gun culture. We've done it for over 100 years in this country. Over that time, gun owners have acquired land, built over 1,400 shooting clubs across the country. It's where they volunteer their time. Their personal and professional relationships are with other gun people. They spend their disposable income on equipment, accessories, events, travel, thousands and thousands of hours in practicing their different disciplines and their different sports. They know the myriad of laws, storage regulations, transport regulations, handling, firearm registration, daily background checks. Handguns can only be used on an approved shooting range. Owners have to drive directly to the range and back without deviation. Deviation is a criminal offense in driving their guns to the range. They follow all of these laws to the letter just to be able to live their lives and live their culture, which again is over 100 years old in Canada. This is why we own handguns. This is the regulatory regime we accept to some extent in order to keep using our property. And this is the story that is never shared with the rest of Canada. I thought it was important to bring that up. Now I'd like to hand it over to my colleague, Tracey Wilson.
Thanks, Rod. Good morning. I'd like to refer back to some points about the Liberals' handling of the skyrocketing crime in Canada. There are a lot of things that we could do, we could invest in, to make our communities safer for everyone. The sad truth is that those solutions don't stigmatize and divide Canadians like gun bans do. The Liberal government has failed to produce a single piece of evidence that confiscating legal guns from licensed owners will reduce the crime and violence we are experiencing across this country. Not only is this morally wrong, but it is a direct threat to the safety of Canadians. Every single dollar spent chasing legal gun owners, the people not committing the violence in our streets, is a dollar not spent catching illegal guns at the border, or spent investing in at-risk youth in vulnerable communities, or spent ensuring that law enforcement have the resources they need to protect the public. Every police service that testified in 𝐂𝐂𝐅𝐑 said the same thing. Scarce resources are at critical levels, so low that they have served notice to Minister Marco Mendicino that they are unable to facilitate his confiscation program. They can't keep up with their daily workload or emergency calls, let alone anything else. Canadian law enforcement need more resources and less political interference. As a participant in the Mass Casualty Commission, the public inquiry into the Nova Scotia tragedy, we were shocked, along with all Canadians, to learn that Minister Blair and the Prime Minister apparently leveraged this tragedy and its victims to support political gun bans they could use against former CPC leader Erin O'Toole. Concerning Bill C-21, if you've been following along, it's not going very well for the Liberals. Committee has been a disaster for them. Obviously, all the committee meetings are available on the 𝐂𝐂𝐅𝐑 committee website, and I do think they are worth watching. Some things have become quite clear during this process. Number one, the more this issue is being talked about, the less popular this handgun ban is becoming. And this is because it is painfully clear to everyone that taking legal guns from licensed owners will not impact actual crime, violence, and gun smuggling. Number two, the Liberals' failure to effectively tackle violent crime means we are all less safe, and that should concern every single Canadian. And number three, the Liberals continue to use the public safety file as a political wedge to divide Canadians, and they have weaponized it against their opposition. There is a cost to these failures, and it can be measured in human lives. Canadians deserve better. Thank you for being here with us today, and we're happy to take your questions.
Good morning, Stephen Jeffrey from the Lobby Monitor. You're here this week to speak in committee. You're holding the press conference this morning. I guess, are you able to take me through some of the other strategies that you're taking to basically ensure that this message gets out and that parliamentarians and the wider public understand the implications here?
Well, we reach out to parliamentarians as much as we can. We can't always get the level of attention that other groups can get for ideological reasons, I would imagine. We have a very strong social media presence. We have a nationally broadcast television show. We have a podcast, I guess the largest firearm-related podcast in the country as well. And we just continue to try to get our message out and get Canadians thinking a little bit more about the details behind this topic, because it's very poorly understood, probably one of the most poorly understood social issue topics that we have. So we're just trying to get the word out and get Canadians to think a little bit deeper about this.
And just as a follow-up, are you able to provide some comment? Just, I believe it was back in late September, just the Alberta Attorney General's challenge, I suppose, to the federal buyback program. So
it's the buyback itself is a tremendously enormous undertaking, and I think when the commitment was made back on May 1st, 2020, it was done again for political expedience and for political ideological purposes without even a thought about, can we really roll out a buyback? What does that mean in a country that's 10 million square kilometers? It's not New Zealand and it's not Australia. So they made that promise because it helped them politically. They wanted to harness the heartache of Canadians. And now, 2.5 years later, they've done nothing but spend, I think, over $10 million talking about the buyback, and they're no closer to implementing it. They also reached out to, it's my understanding, they reached out to Canada Post to have people mail so-called assault-style weapons in the mail to the government. Canada Post rejected that because that's an atrocious security risk. The RCMP have rejected them, and many municipal police forces have rejected them. And now provinces are saying that their police forces are not there to collect licensed gun owners guns. So it's been a tremendous failure. And I think with I guess it's 4 provinces and a territory, telling the federal government they want nothing to do with their buyback, it's really it's a signal that they don't want it, that we're targeting the wrong people. So I'm thankful for that.